DEI as an orchestra where you bring all these different perspectives, different talents, different views, different thinking, this aspect of neurodiversity in one pot, that particular food, when you now get ready to serve it, no one is going to leave that table.
Welcome to the People Champion podcast by Elevate HR. Elevate HR is a cloud-based HR platform for the African market that helps you easily manage your employees' payroll, leave, and performance. If you're an innovation-driven HR professional, then this podcast is for you. As the People Company, we elevate the HR professionals in three ways. Firstly, through a system that makes your work easy and fast. Secondly, our community that helps you interact with like-minded individuals. And thirdly, through this podcast that helps you enhance your skill set as a HR professional. My name is Pilin Kasara, and I will be your host for this podcast. I'm particularly excited about today's conversation because I'm joined by two incredible guests, and I'll go right ahead to introduce them. Allow me to start with the gentleman on my right, Nicholas Kasidhi, Global Director, Talent and Capability Management at Living Goods. Nicholas Kasidhi, karibu sana to our set. Looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Asante sana. Thank you for having me.
What are you looking forward to the most?
So I'm looking forward to some real insights and great ideas on a Friday afternoon like this.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And then secondly, I'm joined by the managing partner at Zeri Capital, Ronald Ouma. We're so honored to have you here.
Pleasure is mine.
What are you most excited about as well? Maybe I could ask the same question.
Understand the place of equity and inclusiveness in the current workspace.
Perfect. So we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we want to get a male perspective. And maybe we can actually just begin with, definitions. What is diversity, equity, and inclusion all about? And maybe I can start with you, Nicholas.
So usually what I say, DEI, as I think we popularly know it for, is around valuing differences and harnessing, all the different perspectives we bring in an organization, in the workplace. Diversity. And then for me, it comes to equity, is really ensuring that everyone fits the right shoe and have the right place ahead of, given the right opportunities to really express themselves in the best way possible. Inclusion is just ensuring that this whole mix of differences, equity actually works. Yeah.
I had somebody once say that diversity is inviting somebody to the dance, and inclusion is asking them to dance.
Yes.
All right, so Ronald, I'd love to know about what you do at Zeri Capital and if you have, championed efforts of DEI at your workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. We at Zeri, largely our work involves what we call corporate finance advisory, and that means that we raise capital for businesses, and at the same time we help companies in mergers and acquisition kind of work. And when you look at finance industry, largely it's a male-dominated industry. Mm-hmm. And the push for diversity is a very important thing because you look for the new issue that is around is called environmental, social, and governance. And when you look at DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, it falls under the governance aspect. Because for us to meet the parameters of environmental, social, and governance, therefore it means that we have to have diversified kind of people within our workforce. And therefore, when you look at us, we currently, for a workforce of 8, we have our ladies are 6, and that's quite a good number so far. Mm-hmm. Though we are doing more hires, we may be biased not to the male side, but so far so good. I think we have met the threshold of diversity pending. And it's not that they're doing how can I say, other kind of work, just to fill in the number. We have like 3 lady analysts with us, who apparently, those are major roles that they are helping us in the organization. So that's ideally what we're currently doing. And I think on the DEI framework, we've kind of met to some degree.
Awesome. I like that. And maybe we can also benchmark from you, Nicholas. What are you doing at Living Goods in an effort to promote DEI? And why is even this conversation important in the first place?
I like that question because you're starting from the why. And I think it's a narrative that I think over the last couple of years, we've been hearing many organizations really trying to think why diversity. And of course, there's a business reason to it, a business imperative. Of course, we do what we do every day, we go to work every day, but it's when it comes to DEI now, we really have to ask ourselves, why is it important to appreciate and be aware of all our differences and the strengths that we bring on board, and how this, supports business growth, innovation, and also accelerating, people's careers. Yeah. So for us, we started this journey about 3 years ago. We started with trying to, look through our baseline positioning through a diagnostic survey, and came up with a number of sort of benchmarking questions to find out, where are we on this journey? Are we too bad? Are we okay? Or we probably need to think about it a bit more. So we did that survey, and out of that, we came out with, I think, like about 7 pillars, called them the 7 Ps. I think one of those Ps is around people. The second P is around policies. Third one is around practice. And then the other one is around power. Then the last one is around processes. So out of these 7 Ps, we mapped out the survey based on those 7 Ps, and each we sort of analyzed each of them to see where we are well positioned and where we have opportunities for for improvement. So most recently, we've sort of come up with a plan to focus on just 3 areas based on the survey that we did. And we see that these are the biggest opportunity that will move us from point A to B. And this is really around power. And power here is very close to decision making. And where most of the people we were engaging with were saying that power is so centralized at the top, and we're not so much involved at every level of decision making. So whether it's things that are affecting employees, or introducing a new policy, with a new sort of like a reward framework, or it's something that we need people to change, or we are stopping guys from going to the office because it's after COVID, or we want guys to come back to the office post-COVID. To what extent have we involved them? So that is touching on power. And the second one is really around psychological safety, really creating an environment where people feel like they really belong, and they can, their views can be heard or will be heard, and they feel free to really succeed by just being themselves, challenging, up and below, and even across, without fear or without feeling like, it might be lead to retaliation or things like that. And then to crown it all, we are now making it what we are calling, third one is around inclusion, and making inclusion work. And how we're making inclusion work is really touching on those 2 areas, power and safety, and bringing giving an opportunity for our staff to really just engage in conversations we're calling intentional conversations, where we become vulnerable and we create a safe space, for them to also be very vulnerable and just talk. And I think for us that is therapy first. And then beyond just talking is really now picking up what are the key areas we need to now prioritize. What do we need to do more of this? Is it around capability? We need to think more about unconscious bias. Are we even aware of do we even know what we don't know? So I think that we're now really focusing on like those three key areas that would have the largest impact for us if we had really got it well.
I love that. Those are some really practical steps that I think we can benchmark. I think you're really doing a great job at living goods. Ronald, if we had like a DEI measuring index, like for the African context, where do you think we'd lie as a continent?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Probably I'll say 5.
A 5? Why? Why 5?
One, when you look at the framework here as explained, one is rarely do organizations allow their team members to challenge power. Yet when you look at organizations which grow, the top management allows them to be challenged, of course, within the right parameters that have been placed. And I think that's still a major issue on this our end, which needs to be built to some extent. The other thing about inclusion is gender. Largely, when people speak about gender, they tend to largely focus on women. But our country, as Kenya, we also have a lot of issues with the boy child. So when you look at that parameter at the workplace, who gets the promotion? Is it an inclusive way of promoting either of their genders? And of course, there are politics attuned all around to it. And I think the third, which I think we may speak about it later, is about the hiring processes. Now, when you see how the HR or the department do their write-up, the language they use in terms of hiring, it's more masculine to some extent. And therefore, a lady who might be qualified for a certain position may not take it, because when you go through the requirements or the way it has been written, it's not gender inclusive on either end. It's more masculine. And therefore, you'll find that few ladies who will apply for a job. And that's why many organizations have realized that. And what they say is that we encourage women, and even they go further and say the persons with a disability to apply. I believe that can be changed if we have a way of writing up our job descriptions and before we're sending them out. So in just in a simple way, when I look at those three parameters in terms of challenging the power, the promotion, and in terms of also the way people get into jobs, I think that we are at an average level. At best, I can give ourselves C.
All right. So you talked briefly about some of the challenges that we're facing when, in promoting DEI efforts. So if we can talk a little bit about that, and I'd love to hear from you, Nicholas. What are some of the challenges that you have experienced personally, and even just what you see us experiencing in promoting DEI?
Yeah. I think it's talked about something around the DEI neutral language that we need to use, especially when it comes to job adverts or announcements. And that's always been a big challenge, because many organizations never think about that, because it's a very small thing with a very big impact, especially someone who is reading that job description. And then the second thing is really, the softer issues around, do we have the goodwill for this? So if already, 80% of your top leadership are all, men, and who are driving the bigger decisions, say the three women also part of this team, to what extent do they feel part of this, male-dominated team? And before, I think a couple of years ago, when we do this International Women's Day, there used to be this he for she campaign. Yeah. Like, to what extent are our men supporting our women to really get out there, get their views known, give them more confidence and platforms to grow, and and this has to be very deliberate, because you'd put out a job out there for say a commercial director, for instance, and say I'm a commercial manager, and Keely is also a commercial manager, but you realize that Nick would go for that role because he thinks he has 70% chance of qualifying, while Keely will be trying to tick all the boxes and looking at, hey, okay, this role, okay, MBA, added advantage, I don't have an MBA.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. 10 years experience, Nick has 7, but it still applies. So what role do we have as men, especially when it comes to gender diversity, in promoting growth for women, and also really just creating systems, a level playing field, all the processes. So whether it is promotion, whether it is performance appraisals or evaluations, whether it is, giving people chances, opportunities, who will you pick first? Yeah. If you had a chance to spend $1 million, on a leadership development program, for your top, for your high performing teams, and you have 3, and 2 of those are guys, and you have 1 woman, and you have to choose one, how will you make the decision as the leader? So these are things that we need to start now, challenging ourselves and asking those tough questions. How am I holding myself accountable as a leader when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Yeah, it has to be a personal challenge for me first. Then as an organization leader, then I can now challenge my peers and my teams to do the same, and then role model it. Because if it doesn't come from me, then people will just see it as a nice to have. In fact, in most cases, it's actually defaulted to HR. This is one of those initiatives they are trying to, bring around, But then if you look at it in and out, it has a lot of ripple effect across the organization if it's done well. And especially from a governance perspective, I was talking about, you have the right structures, and then depending on the size of the organization, you would probably have categories of staff. Some people call them DEI councils, some call them employee resource groups. But these are champions who actually are parts of the larger employee population, and people listen to them and people respect them. So they can actually help you advance that agenda to a larger extent, rather than keeping at the top, So when, you start looking at the smaller things, go to meetings, encourage everyone to speak up, and create that environment so that people become vulnerable. But as a leader, you have to demonstrate that vulnerability first, for others to follow.
Oh, wow. All right. So you've talked about it being the responsibility of, leaders to advance it. Ronald, who else should take up this responsibility of advancing DEI efforts?
For me, I think it's an organization-wide role. Definitely it has to be led by the top management, starting from the top person at the top, And the way I look at it is more of a strategy issue. There is no way you are going to conquer the market when internally you still have DEI politics on the way. That's how I look at it. Like an example, early this year when we were doing our objectives and key results, the analyst groups were doing their objective and key results. The communication group were also doing their objective and key results. And one of the objectives which was seen around was that operational excellence. So how then do we make operational excellence what are these key results for operational excellence? Making sure that there is a place for the women. Let's say they're in the lactating stage and that they have their children around, making sure that they have a space for them. Another example was an inclusive one, like making sure there's a prayer room for any practicing Christian or Muslim around. And when another key results probably is making sure that when people come to work, everybody is handled on the right level. So I've just switched that example that we're doing at our place to an example of our DEI. And therefore, for me, I think it begins at the top. How then do we define the strategy of the firm? Then it will cascade down. But now when we leave it solely to the HR, that's a leader. It's like running away from your role. As a leader, you're supposed to look for your people. Whether they're the sweepers, whether they're the cleaners, whether the staff, the team, or of the company, you're supposed to look at everyone. And I think when you look at organizations that apparently have had that, the rate of performance has gone up, An example is Safaricom, when Bob Collymore introduced a place for women for lactating mothers. The rate of performance went high because there was a way in which they were able to spend time at work, but they were allowed to leave their desk to go and check their children playing. And even that, the children not on their own, they had their daycare leaders who were there with them. So such a thing increases the performance of people. So for me, it comes at the top. Another example is, we currently are starting to appreciate the place of mental health in an organization. Having listened to a certain time, I was listening to BBC, they were speaking about the mental health and how religion or a therapist, having an internal therapist or religious person can really help in terms of output performance. And when we're looking at the organizations that apparently have an in-house therapist or an attachee therapist, the kind of production and work was high. So yes, I require results from my team, but how then am I being inclusive or equitable in a way that to understand that Pili probably is going through a tough period of time? What we as an organization can have a policy that if anybody apart from Pili is going through that, can meet the company therapist or probably the chaplain for the company, and they'll be able now to be attuned and that to be able now to grow. So for me, in simple sense, it begins with the person at the top and how they define the strategy of the firm rather than just cooling it off at the HR department. Yeah.
You've just answered like the numbers guy, because I was about to ask from a finance perspective what the impact of DEI is on a company's bottom line. And I think you've touched on that, like performance management, improvement rather.
Yeah, absolutely. The performance is quite high. And like for us, we people don't, my team members don't go out for lunch. We literally have a lunch for them. And just a simple thing, you could see how they were, because mostly in the afternoons, people were lazing around. And the way we've done our lunch is that we had to bring a nutritionist to define what we are eating, because we realized that if they eat carbohydrates, even when they eat outside or inside, if they eat carbohydrates, what happens? They'll sleep or they'll lazy around, they'll do the stuff. But we work in an industry where an output is really important. So you have to be working so hard in the morning, at the same time in the afternoon. So what did we do? Just decided to look at the costs, budget costs, introduce lunch for everybody. The advantages were still here, and the output has gone high. So that's what you're trying to say. Of course, it is a cost. You may look at it as a cost from the finance perspective on our budgets, but on the overall effect of the firm is that you may retain that talent which may be picked by a bigger firm, because you have things which they're looking for, and the cost may not be much. The cost may be much immediate now, but in the long run, it may not be much, because I can imagine the time, the resources they'll have to go out and all that. Now they're focusing, they're able to put in the time, they're putting an hour, they're meeting their targets, and meet targets are met, profits are met, and
Wow.
the shareholders are happy.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I hope our employer is watching this podcast. Anyway, Kasidhi, what would you say to people who would say that, DEI efforts are really taking away from people who are actually qualified and more deserving of these opportunities?
Yeah, is it from a recruitment point of view?
Yes, from a recruitment point of view.
Yeah. Most probably they do not connect those efforts, both at a personal and also at an organizational level, which means it has not been really unpacked for them, or because then they see it as something that is it's distant to us, so because of diversity and inclusion, and because now you're really championing for probably more women in a male-dominated area, you're not giving equal chances to everybody. Or because, say, the role is highly technical, say you're looking for a machine operator in a factory, 80% of your applicants are going to be men, obviously, but then you have a push to really balance that shortlist. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you are disqualifying the men who would obviously be qualified for that role. What you're doing is that you are taking a deliberate approach to balancing the team that you want, because you're giving, these others, the women, also an equal opportunity to showcase what they have. What I used to do in the past, so when I used to work in sort of like in a plant environment with Diageo, is that we would hire technical engineers for the plant or people like that, and we would have an advert that everybody would apply, and we take them through the same process of assessments and interviews and everything. But at the point of long list, we ensure that that long list meets at least 50-50. So then, as we filter it in through the process and narrow down the list, there's a higher chances of having a much more balanced list. Instead of just putting it out there and just blindly shortlisting guys without having those quotas. So because those quotas really help if you're being deliberate about it. You're not saying that you're denying other people an opportunity. You're only advancing this strategic agenda to ensure that the teams are actually fully on board, and based on what you mentioned around tying this to real strategic business outcomes. Yeah, diverse teams perform much better. They challenge each other much better. They are more innovative. You have a higher chance of retaining more because people will know you, and you'll have a reputation for advancing careers for the marginalized, advancing careers for the underrepresented. And these are histories that are proven. I mean, think about breweries. For the longest time, you've not had women actually down there at the plant, doing what men are meant to do. But now all these free plants are actually fully staffed, 100% women engineers, female engineers, who are running the lines, and they've proven all the biases wrong. That you can also do it. And it's actually becoming a real success story that is now being replicated in other markets. So I always tell people, never worry about that. Always think of how do you then redeploy these other members of the team in places where they are more productive, or even elevate them. Give them a challenge. Okay, so now we're bringing other younger people. Actually, in other cases, it could be generational differences, not just gender. Where you promote a younger person to lead more older people. So give them that opportunity, and then challenge yourself and see, okay, how is this mix working out? Are we seeing better output? Are we seeing better engagement? So you look at your engagement scores. Are we seeing better productivity? And our people generally happy.
Wow, I really love that. And maybe as now a parting shot, what advice would both of you give to people who have, watched this podcast and they are motivated to start their efforts of championing DEI? Like, where do they start? What word of advice would you give to people, professionals, or just people in general? We could hear a parting shot from both you and Nicholas. So let's start with you, Ronald.
I think at the end of the day is that there has to be a human face in business. Just boils down to being a good human being. Because when you look at DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, it just boils down to a good human being. Profit with purpose, the way Ajay Banga, the current nominee for the World Bank position, says while he was at MasterCard. And you could see what he did at MasterCard, if I can use that example. Ajay said that they are out there to do profit with purpose. And that led to reorganization of the whole MasterCard team. And when you look at the results within the first year, it was quite exponential, to a point that when he retired, he was retained as an executive chairman, not just a normal chairman, an executive chairman, technically like a co-CEO. And when you look at profit with purpose, it doesn't begin with your customers or clients. It begins with your team members. So do you need an organization that you'll be solving issues left, right, and center instead of looking for leads? Or do you need an organization where people are free, are open despite their weaknesses, but you have structure to manage those weaknesses and they're able to diversify? So the advice I will give them is to proceed with the DEI. It's qualitative. The problem with business is we need to give us the quantitative results we need. So I'll urge them to proceed and to do that DEI in an equitable way, in an inclusive way, and be able to have them, despite all any background they may have. Yes.
Wow, lovely. And finally, Nicholas.
I think it's the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. I mean, look at us. We are all unique in our own ways. We are all very different. We have our own giftings and talents. Imagine if we bring that together. Think of an orchestra. Everyone is playing his instrument. Everyone is playing, doing their own thing. But then the output we are getting is just one single sound that makes a whole lot of a difference. Now, if you approach DEI as an orchestra where you bring all these different perspectives, different talents, different views, different thinking, this aspect of neurodiversity in one pot, that particular food, when you now get ready to serve it, no one is going to leave that table. So think as a company, do you want people to leave your table and go eat to the neighbors, or you want them to remain at your table and help you even build greater tables, expand the rooms, because now you're getting bigger and become an empire and an enterprise. So think orchestra, think expansion, think positive, because diversity and inclusion is the right thing to do.
What a wonderful way to end this podcast. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is the right thing to do. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for gracing our set today and for being a part of this amazing conversation. I have learned a lot this evening, and I'm sure our audience have as well. So make sure you let us know a thing or two you've picked from this conversation, and also we'd love to hear your thoughts as well on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. We've had an amazing time. Asante sana. And if you're looking for a HR system to manage your leave, payroll, and performance, check out our website, elevatehr.co, for more information. We'd also like to thank our hosts for this podcast, Himalaya Heights, Kenya, situated at the heart of Kilimani along Kindaruma Road. If you're looking for tastefully designed, state-of-the-art, luxurious apartments, then please check them out.